Welcome back to more UCL Fantasy content. This will be the best wildcard squad for Matchday 3. This chip will enforce permanent changes to your squad, and unlike the Limitless, that only lasts for one match day and you have no budget restrictions, but here you have to adhere to the 100 million budget you started with, but price changes did happen after Matchday 2, so in terms of my squad value, it will be 100.7 million, and it will vary depending on who you started this season with, and that is going to be very important. Player performances will dictate the price changes, and it's not going to be transfer activity like we see in FPL. I deployed the wildcard chip back in Matchday 2, and I'll talk about how I performed in my team selection very soon. This will be a triple upload and recording today, so show support to the channel, drop a like, subscribe, and also hit the notification bell so you're always up to date on my content, both FPL and UCL Fantasy. Our aim is to get this to the 200 likes and to keep on pushing towards new goals like 37 subscribers. Check all the links in the description for my Patreon and the championships, fair access to my videos, amongst many other perks. My Discord server, the UCL Fantasy League, and Spotify can also be found in the description. But without further ado, let's jump straight into it. If you are new to UCL Fantasy, I would highly recommend you check out my chip strategy guide and also the how to play video, because that will break down all the facets of this game so nothing catches you off guard. But essentially, you want to pick players from the Tuesday and Wednesday and sub out your Tuesday players after those games are completed, the lowest scoring ones, and then bring on those yet to play on the Wednesday. And with the captaincy, go for a Tuesday player first, so don't captain Mbappe or Kane who play on the Wednesday. Captain someone like Haaland or Yamal on the Tuesday, and then you can switch it if needed, if you're greedy or just think that the points aren't enough, and then switch it to a Wednesday player. That's the way it works, and the substitutions are similar. But let's start off with the two goalkeepers. You want to have one Tuesday goalkeeper and one on the Wednesday, but on the wildcard, you want to ensure that this doesn't become an issue in future match days, and there aren't too many goalkeeper pairings that won't clash up until match day 8, where essentially everyone plays at the same time anyway, and you can't make subs for that specific game week. But in this case, of course, it's very easy to just pick one Tuesday and Wednesday goalkeeper for matchday 3, and you think you're all done, but they might clash in matchday 4, 5, 6, and 7, and I'll discuss one of the best goalkeeper pairings right now in UCL Fantasy. Marseille are top of Ligue 1. They beat PSG a couple of weeks ago. It was a 1-0 victory and really put in a big performance. He did the same against Real Madrid back in matchday 1, where he made 13 saves and delivered 5 points, but ultimately he was pipped by Mbappe to the Player of the Match award, and he got a clean sheet against Ajax in a 4-0 win back in matchday 2, and he also cost 4.5 million, so really will be a great option between the sticks, and Chevalier won't be too shabby. I know PSG's fixtures aren't great, but you have nice rotation between Chevalier and Rulli. PSG slipped up over the weekend. They drew 3-3 at home. They sit second in Ligue 1, but they're still looking quite solid in the Champions League. They beat Barcelona away from home in matchday 2 and got a clean sheet against Atalanta, a 4-0 win there for the Parisians. So I think this goalkeeper pairing alongside Raya and Carnesecchi will be the best you can go for up until matchday 8, where everyone will then play at the same time. So you can't really have, someone playing on the following day because everyone just plays at the same time. So substitutions won't be a thing then. But up until matchday 7, this goalkeeper pairing will do you just fine. And yes, I am ill, unfortunately, so some words I can't even bloody say properly. I'm trying my best, but hopefully you still enjoy the content and also enjoy my picks. I think Rulli and Chevalier is going to be very solid in the long term. For matchday 3, I do admit, with both of them being away with relatively tough fixtures against Sporting and Bayer Leverkusen, it won't be great. But then, on the other hand, you've got Carnesecchi and Raya, and they've got home fixtures, but in the case of Arsenal, they face Atletico Madrid at home. So you won't find perfection with any of these goalkeeper pairings, but I think Rulli and Chevalier will offer you great value and also give you consistent returns in the long term. Denzel Dumfries is always one of the top defenders in UCL Fantasy, and Inter Milan are now improving. Back in the Club World Cup, they were really struggling with their new manager, and they ultimately had that big defeat in the Champions League final, which I think probably scarred them for a little longer than they expected, but they're now looking very solid. They're top of Serie A, and they got another victory. I think it was a 1-0 win, scored by Boni, who could start over Marcus Thuram, who is injured for matchday 3. But Denzel Dumfries is probably Inter Milan's best UCL Fantasy asset overall. I like Calhanoglu in the midfield, Lautaro up front, and Sommer in goal. You've also got DeMarco, who's having his best ever season, arguably, in terms of minutes and his fitness, but I think Dumfries is still the go-to Inter Milan asset facing Union Saint-Gilloise away from home. I'm also going to go for a bit of a left field pick, so to speak, but he's actually in my own team selection right now. In Dan Burn, I think Newcastle are worth covering defensively. They lost 2-1 against Brighton on Saturday, but they've still been very consistent over the course of the season. And apart from that match, they conceded to Bradford, Arsenal, Barcelona and Liverpool. In every other game, they have kept a clean sheet in this new season. And Dan Burn has been starting every single match, either as a left back or in central defence, and Eddie Howe loves him. He's reliable, he gives you consistent performances, and even in terms of ball recoveries, and in FPL it's called defensive contributions, he can be quite decent with those metrics as well. So Dan Burn is my favourite Newcastle defender in the long term, but whilst Livramento is out, you might want to consider Trippier, who is a bit of a risk in terms of rotation because Newcastle might still decide to give him a bit of a rest or put him on the bench to prevent any injuries. So Dan Burn is the safest Newcastle option alongside Nick Pope in goal, but then you're going to struggle with the goalkeeper pairing, which is so crucial in the long term. Let's now go for a Chelsea defender who would also make it into the best limitless squad. I think Malo Gusto is the safest bet at 4.5 million. Reece James only has 2 points so far in the Champions League, while Gusto has 12. It's a different story in FPL, where James got 18 points against Nottingham Forest with a goal and assist on top of a clean sheet, and he's got that massive return in him, but his minutes could be managed in the Champions League more often, so I think Malo Gusto is probably the best Chelsea defender on the wild card for the entire league phase. I would also recommend an Arsenal option, whether it's Raya in goal or a defender like Gabriel Magalhaes, who has been outstanding in UCL Fantasy and FPL with consistent returns through clean sheets, goals, and he even got an assist against Fulham in that 1-0 victory for Arsenal, and they're top of the Premier League right now, and they're looking very solid overall. Only 3 goals conceded across all competitions, and they're keeping clean sheet after clean sheet. Their only goals conceded were against Man City, Liverpool and Newcastle. So I think the Gunners are looking very solid, and despite facing Atletico Madrid at home, they are third in the clean sheet odds, which I showed you in the best limitless squad video. And by the way, in this podcast, I'll be showing you the goal scorer odds and the top 10 captains towards the very end. But let's complete this defensive line with one more option who only costs 5 million in Mickey van der Ven, because Spurs have excellent fixtures. The only exception really is PSG away in a couple of weeks' time, but I still think Van der Ven can do the business. He faces Monaco away next, and Spurs look better in away matches. They lost against Aston Villa at home. It was a 2-1 defeat on Sunday, and I think they're just much more consistent, and their style of play suits away matches more so than at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. And Van der Ven is quite decent for ball recoveries. Romero picked up an injury in the warm-up against Aston Villa, so he is a serious doubt. I think he could be out for the next couple of weeks, so if we get any confirmation or reliable sources indicating this, I'll be covering it in the deadline stream tomorrow. You also have Pedro Porro, who has a bit of attacking threat, but he hasn't really shown it this season, and Van der Ven scored against Bodo Glimt, assisted by Porro, but Van der Ven got the 7-pointer and the Spaniard got 4 points. So I do like this defensive line. You've got 3 London clubs covered in this sort of position. You've got Dan Burn as well, a lot of Premier League coverage overall, but Denzel Dumfries has a really high ceiling in general. You've also got great fixtures in the long term, clean sheet potential, ball recoveries, you name it, and the goalkeepers offer terrific value. They both cost 4.5 million, and you're covering 2 of the best defences at the moment, especially in the case of PSG, who admittedly have tough fixtures, but they're still one of the best around. Let's now go to the midfield, where things get even more interesting, and trust me, there won't be a Premier League bias when it comes to this position. You will see a lot of variety in here and the forward line. Borussia Dortmund have solid fixtures up until matchday 7. The only exception would be Man City, of course, in matchday 4, but Adeyemi could score in such a game. He was showing real consistency before the international break, but recently his performances have dipped, and I'm less keen on this sort of midfield pick at the moment, but I think a Dortmund attacker like Guirassy up front or Adeyemi is still viable. They face Copenhagen away next, then it's Man City, followed by the likes of Bodo Glimt. So I think Dortmund are still worth having up until matchday 7, with one defender like Anton, who only costs 4 million. He's quite decent for ball recoveries and nailed on. Ben Sebaini was on the bench against Bayern Munich in that 2-1 defeat, but he's on penalties, and if he starts in the Champions League again, he will be my favourite defender from Borussia Dortmund, but they're not going to keep many clean sheets. I think ultimately with them, you want to have one of their attackers, but they have looked more solid defensively with Niko Kovac this season, and they are also right up there in the Bundesliga table. It was also a decent performance overall against Bayern Munich. Schlotterbeck and Kobel were the standout performers for Borussia Dortmund. But let's now go to a player from the other side of that match who scored the winning goal for the Bavarians in Michael Olise. He is underpriced at 8 million, and he will probably go up in price very soon to 8.1. But Bayern Munich have some tough fixtures after Club Brugge. That includes Arsenal very soon, but I still think Olise can do well in such matches. He's 10 play, his ownership is over 40%, and he's got 18 points so far this season. He blanked in Matchday 1 and was quite disappointing. I mean, technically he got 4 points, but that wasn't really what we expected against Chelsea. But he got that big return against Club Brugge and was narrowly pipped to player of the match by Harry Kane, who is the best of them all when it comes to Bayern Munich. But the third midfielder will be at a similar price tag to Adeyemi at 7.1 million in Çalhanoğlu, and Inter Milan have the best fixtures up until Matchday 5. Then there's a clear fixture swing, and by that stage, if you've got 2 or 3 Inter players, you might want to consider trimming that down. But for now, I think it's definitely viable to have Dumfries and Çalhanoğlu in your UCL Fantasy teams, and he's the main penalty taker as he was last season, where he scored 1 against Arsenal, and he's also decent for ball recoveries. He can get the odd goal or assist, and back in Matchday 1, he got 2 assists against Ajax, and Inter Milan are looking solid right now. But let's now go for 2 different sort of midfielders, and one of them is an injury doubt, so watch this space. But if Enzo Fernandez is available, I would recommend him. You've also got Moises Caicedo for the ball recoveries, and that would save you 0.5 million in the process. And otherwise, you might just want to go for Yildiz, who faces Real Madrid away this week, but Juventus have great fixtures afterwards, like Paphos, and that's where Yildiz could come into a league of his own. So I don't really mind having Yildiz on the wild card. I would only go for Enzo if he's declared fit, and a lot of newspapers and reliable sources indicate that he will start against Ajax this week. So I think Enzo Fernandez will be my favourite Chelsea midfielder. Caicedo isn't too shabby either. I'm not too keen on the rest until Cole Palmer is back in November, and that could even be a little bit longer because he's had a few injury problems this season. But the final option will be a budget midfielder, and I would try to target a Galatasaray player against Bodo Glimt, and their fixtures are quite decent overall. And Yilmaz only cost 5 million. He produced 5 points against Liverpool, and up until you get to Matchday 7 and 8, that's where Galatasaray have a poor fixture swing. But up until then, they're right up there in the FDR, and I think having one of their attackers like Osimhen up front or someone like Yilmaz in the midfield is certainly a decent choice, and it's also an enabler. I think having this also allows you to have some premium defenders, also going for some big hitters up front, which is going to be the biggest sort of appeal of this wildcard squad. But you might be thinking, where are the Barcelona players? I want to have one of Koundé or Balde in that defensive line. You could certainly do so, and in a couple of weeks' time when Joan Garcia is back, you might want to go for him as your main goalkeeper alongside Vicario. That is a good goalkeeper pairing up until Matchday 8, but I wouldn't go for that now because Garcia is still injured, and ultimately with Barcelona, their main attackers are going to be the main UCL Fantasy assets. So Yamal in the midfield, maybe Rashford up front until Lewandowski's back. That could be considered. I will show you alternative picks so you can have some Barcelona players as well. And Yamal for me is the clear standout, but that requires a significant downgrade from one of the big hitters up front, and they offer terrific value at between 10.5 to 10.6 million. Despite Bayern Munich having a clear fixture swing in Matchday 4, which goes against them, I still think Kane is fixture-proof. He's in the form of his life right now, scoring at will, and even when playing in a deeper position like he did against Borussia Dortmund, he's putting in top performances, winning the Player of the Match award and also scoring goals. So Harry Kane does make it into this team. There is no surprise there. He's only second behind Kylian Mbappe in terms of Champions League goals and also in terms of UCL Fantasy points amongst forwards. Erling Haaland is fifth in that metric, behind the likes of Thuram, who is injured for Matchday 3, and Burkhardt from Frankfurt, who is a 5.1 million forward that you might want to include in your final setup, especially as an enabler for Lamine Yamal in the midfield. But I still think Erling Haaland against Villarreal away gives you a great captaincy option on the Tuesday, but conversely, so does Yamal. Having both of them at the same time will be difficult unless you use the Limitless chip, and I talk about that in that podcast which was released earlier today. So Erling Haaland against Villarreal will be my Tuesday captain, as discussed in the team selection as well, but Haaland is going to be a great option. His underlying stats are incredible. He has 11 Premier League goals already, and if he stays fit, he's going to win the Golden Boot again. It's just a question of how many goals he's going to score. My prediction is 33 in the Premier League alone, and he has more goals than games played in the Champions League, so Erling Haaland is still one of the best forwards in world football. The same goes for Kylian Mbappe. It's Juventus up next, who haven't won a game in 6 matches, and Real Madrid are top of La Liga. Mbappe scored the winner against Getafe, who went down to 9 men eventually, but Real Madrid always find a way to get the wins, and they're going to be competing with Barcelona until the very end of the campaign for that La Liga title. And in the Champions League, Real Madrid are always in the conversation to win it. They are the kings of Europe. They've won it so many times, and even in an off-season, they'll reach a quarter-final or semi-final and be very competitive overall. So this is the 50-man squad on the wild card with the captaincy, just like I discussed in the best limitless squad. On the Tuesday, I would go for Erling Haaland, and on the Wednesday, I'd go for Harry Kane personally. But if you do have Yamal as well, I would seriously consider him for the captaincy on the Tuesday. It's a little bit differential per se, and then if it doesn't go well, you can then rely on one of Mbappe or Kane on the Wednesday, and my preference is Harry Kane with that fixture. Let me now show you a few alternative picks, and that will include the likes of Yamal and more Barcelona coverage, and let me know if you prefer this team or the one with Yamal and a bit of a different structure overall. There is also a different goalkeeper pairing with Raya and Karnaseci, which is what I've currently got as well. And Karnaseci has a decent fixture on paper against Slavia Prague at home, and they had 2 red cards, by the way, over the last 2 match days. Raya does have a tough fixture on paper, but Arsenal are 3rd in the clean sheet odds. Dumfries, Byrne, Gusto still remain. The same goes for Van der Ven, and I've gone for Anton instead of Ben Sabani to save a bit of money and fund the other moves. So Caicedo comes in for Enzo Fernandez. There's also Yildiz in this 50-man setup, so no Adeyemi, and Yamal comes in as well, and there is no Yilmaz as a 5 million midfielder, but that means Mbappe drops out for Marcus Rashford as a short-term punt. There is nothing left over in the bank. I have 100.7 million as my overall squad value. Some people watching might not be able to afford this, and others might have a few extra millions to spend and maybe make a few incremental upgrades if possible. And maybe you could just go from Caicedo to Yilmaz and then get a lot of money in the bank that way. You can also do Yildiz to Enzo Fernandez, but I wouldn't go for 2 Chelsea midfielders as much as I rate Caicedo and Enzo Fernandez as UCL Fantasy and FPL options this season. I don't think having both of them at the same time is viable, but Chelsea have excellent fixtures. Having 1 or 2 Blues assets is certainly a great choice. I do rate that, and it all depends on Enzo Fernandez's fitness. If he's available, he'll be my favourite 6.5 million midfielder. Otherwise, Yildiz will still be one of the best options around in the long term, but you might want to skip him against Real Madrid. Personally, I still think Los Merengues have some deficiencies defensively, and with Juventus, my main issue with them is that sometimes they struggle to score goals or create, and over the weekend they lost 2-0 against Como. So I think Yildiz is still quite decent, but you might get frustrated by him from time to time like I was back in Matchday 2, and Rashford will pale in comparison to Mbappe, especially in the long term, but the main reason I've gone for him is to get more Barca coverage and to fund that Yamal move in the midfield. Which structure do you prefer? And would you prefer Yamal or Haaland for the captaincy on the Tuesday? You do deprive yourself of more Wednesday captaincy options, and you are basically going to go to Harry Kane on the 22nd, which isn't really a bad thing. Elise is a decent shout as well when it comes to the armband, but I would still favour Harry Kane with the form he's in, and he's basically got some ridiculous stats in the Bundesliga and Champions League this season. So that completes the 15-man squads for the wild card, and if I was activating the chip this week, I would be going for one of these structures. I've got a similar setup myself, which I did back in Matchday 2, and it's quite a struggle to know what to do with my free transfers, but that'll be discussed in my team selection, of course. And now, let me show you the goal scorer odds and the top 10 captains for Matchday 3. There are some familiar faces like Harry Kane in top spot. He's the only player with over 60% probability of scoring in Matchday 3, and all of these stats are taken by the website fantasyfootballpundit.com with the assumption that these players start. Osimhen is 2nd despite facing Bodo Glimt at home, but Joao Pedro is 3rd despite blanking in 4 consecutive games in the Premier League and getting a red card in Matchday 2 against Benfica, so he won't be available against Ajax. You can ignore him, and ultimately with Chelsea, my favourite attacker would be Enzo Fernandez in the midfield. Mbappe is 4th. He's ranked higher than Erling Haaland, but the Norwegian plays on the Tuesday, and he's my favourite Tuesday captaincy option alongside Lamine Yamal, who also features on this list. Scamacca, Guirassy, Yamal, Salah, Ferran Torres, Mauro Icardi, Lautaro Martinez, Nicholas Jackson, Luis Diaz and Lookman complete the top 15, but like I said before, Joao Pedro and also Ferran Torres could be ignored here, and Icardi probably won't start. Osimhen should get the nod here, despite in recent Turkish League matches, Icardi getting the starts in that competition, and Galatasaray are flying in the Turkish League. But those are the goal scorer odds. I'll show you any updates in tomorrow's deadline stream. And with the top 10 captains, this is certainly subject to change, but in 10th spot, I've got Guirassy, and despite being so poor this season, Mohamed Salah is 9th. He got a massive return against Atletico Madrid back in Matchday 1, and he could do something similar against Frankfurt, who score a lot of goals, but their defence is shambolic. Lautaro Martinez is 8th, with Dumfries and Rashford just outside the top 5, which comprises of Elise, Yamal, Mbappe, Erling Haaland, and Harry Kane. If you want to go a little bit differential per se, you could captain Yamal on the Tuesday. I don't really mind that. There's not much separating him and Yamal, and even with Harry Kane and Mbappe, you could definitely argue that it's still quite close, but Kane has the better fixture on paper. My current plan is to captain Harry Kane on the Wednesday, but what about the Tuesday? I'll be talking about this in my team selection podcast, and hopefully this has provided a lot of insight for you. If that has been the case, then like this video, subscribe to the channel, and also hit the notification bell so you're always up to date with my content, both UCL Fantasy and FPL. Keep your eyes peeled for Game Week 9 coverage, as I got yet another green arrow in Game Week 8, and it has now been a very consistent run both in FPL and UCL Fantasy. Let's continue on this upward trajectory. The same goes for my YouTube channel. Let's close in on 37,000 subscribers and get this video to over 200 likes. Follow me on X, Instagram and Blue Sky, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description for my Patreon and the Champships, further access to my videos, amongst many other perks. My Discord server, the UCL Fantasy League and Spotify can also be found in the description. I'll see you tomorrow for the Matchday 3 deadline stream, and also in the team selection coming out very soon. So this will be a triple upload, and there's much more to look forward to throughout the week. And in the deadline stream, I'll provide team news, injury updates, my final squad. Channel members and patrons will get early access to any sort of updates that happen before anybody else, and also get priority reply to comments, which is very useful in hectic deadline streams, as you'll see in the one coming up very soon. And every month I'll be gifting 10 memberships. A big shout out to all the members, patrons, and those that have gifted memberships as well. The same goes for super chatters. You're massively appreciated, and I wish you all the best of luck for the rest of the season.